And good morning, Birds fans. It is a Thursday edition of Birds 365. That would be with John McMullen and Jody McDonald. And John McMullen's got to leave the comfort of his ocean studio to actually do some work today, to get down to the NovaCare complex to check out the Eagles. J Mac, you got a full tank of gas ready to go?
I don't have a full tank of gas. That's part of the problem. I do have to stop for gas, Jody. But don't say this stuff out loud because you sound like my wife. And my wife's like, "Oh, football's over. You can do this. You can do that. You can do this. You can do that." And no matter how many times I explain to her, the off season for reporters and in a lot of ways, more, it's more work than the regular season, which is pretty structured and game to game. It never ends in the NFL. We might not be boots on the ground at the NovaCare complex, but this team keeps us very, very busy.
Well understood. Just noting that you actually have to get in the car and go. Yeah, I'm saying it's kind of easier for you today because it's right there in front of you. You're not having to dig. You can use your two eyes and see something, which is the first question I'm going to ask you today. And the media is allowed in. You get to stay for the entire practice, right? The hour or maybe under an hour or slightly over an hour.
Yeah.
You get to be there the whole time, right? Not just, all right, you guys can leave now.
Yeah, get to be there the whole time. Only pictures and video for a very short portion of the practice, so fans get excited with that. But we don't get to, you never get to film team drills or anything like that because God forbid anything gets out there. But yeah, we get to watch the whole practice. We get to watch the whole practice next week. We'll get to watch every practice in training camp. Back in the old days, we would watch every mini camp practice. Now, like everything else, scaled back. There's 6 OTAs overall. We get to watch 2 of them. One this week, one next week. And that's as much as you will see of this team until training camp in late July.
Gotcha. So here's what I need John McMullen's observant eye on. And I think you'll agree with me. This is something, if you can pick up something on it, it would be well of note. And both you and me and all of our streamers would like to know. They're going to run some defensive drills. It's going to be a lot of 7-on-7s, but there'll be some 11 personnel out there on the field. And when I say 11, I mean all 11 guys, not specifically a design to it, but all 11 players on the field defensively. Jonathan Gannon is no longer here. He has been replaced by Sean Desai, who, after listening to Sean Desai, you guys did a good job with your first chance to interview him. I think you got to know the guy and see how he ticks and what his general philosophy is about playing football. But I expect there to be some differences between his defense and Jonathan Gannon's defense. It's going to be very similar. The general philosophy is right in line, but everybody does some things differently. There'll be tinkering, there'll be changes. Do you think you'll even be able to get a hint at what those changes might be in anything you're going to pick up before camp ever even opens up?
Probably not. I mean, maybe from the personnel aspect of it, you might get, 3 safeties is something I'm interested in. Is he going to use 3 safeties more than 2 linebackers? But that part of that has to do with, maybe Terrell Edmonds / Sidney Brown as a rookie is better than Nicholas Morrow. So that might be just a personnel thing. And if they're able to get a linebacker at some point, maybe that shifts back. But he's not going to be unveiling, looks. A lot of people have talked about overload sort of looks he used in Chicago at times that maybe are a little bit different. In other words, you put, say, Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat on the same side and try to attack maybe a perceived weakness in that way a little bit more. He seemed to do that quite a bit in Chicago. but the base philosophy is going to be the same. And I know people don't want to hear that, but it's going to be the same. I mean, if anything, it might be a little bit closer. And maybe if you want change, hang your hat on that. Sean even mentioned it when talking about a lot of people use Vic Fangio's defense, but a lot of those people didn't learn it under Vic Fangio. He actually learned it under Vic Fangio. Jonathan Gannon didn't, Brandon Staley didn't, a bunch of people didn't. So maybe he runs it better than Jonathan Gannon. So I would try to hang my hat on that rather than expecting, crazy blitzes and all the I'm sorry. I ask all the time at fans, do you want me to lie to you? I can lie to you, but that's not my thing. So it's not going to change much. They believe in what they believe in, limiting explosive plays, and trying to stop the run with light boxes and try to disguise coverage as much as possible. And if things go wrong, which you don't want, if things go wrong, maybe you start to see some changes. Maybe you start to see Nick Sirianni demanding certain things, but philosophy is the philosophy, and that part's not going to change much.
Well understood. That's why I said tinkering, slight differences. It's not coming in here with a whole new look and a whole new way of doing things. That's not happening. I think we all understand that. But as you point out, good point about what Desai said. He got it directly from Vic Fangio. Others got it through others who got it through Vic Fangio. And man, what do you know what year Fangio is going into the Hall of Fame? Because with the amount of copying of his system and the credit he gets for doing it his way, he should be rubber stamped now for a spot in Canton. But I digress. We'll see how the Dolphins defense plays this year. I'm intrigued to see the small changes in detail that we may see from the Eagles defense. And maybe it'll be even less than I think. I'm not stating it's going to be massive changes. I'm with you 100% on it. It's going to be very similar to what we've looked at the last 2 years. But there'll be some changes that I'm interested
Well,
to see.
I mention all the time with the offense in the shift from Nick Sirianni to Shane Steichen as the play caller. It's a little bit different because they're different people and they'll do different things in the moment. That's where you're going to get differences. And then the second part is you have 5 different starters. So you have different personnel. So, you're going to see differences, but from a philosophy and scheme standpoint, I don't think it's going to be much different.
Well, you're right, personnel changes, a couple defections via free agency, and we'll see how Howie Roseman is done at filling in the blanks on the Eagles. I'll give one good piece of news to the new Eagles defensive coordinator, Sean Desai, who you and I are on record, and several of our guests have agreed with us. He's kind of swimming upstream. There's both the very positive aspect of taking over the Eagle defense, and there's also a negative aspect. The positive aspect is his name's not Jonathan Gannon, who is more disliked than liked in town, despite the results, despite what the stats said. People just weren't Jonathan Gannon fans here in this town. So anyone not named Jonathan Gannon is stepping into a position where at least a good percentage of the fan base is going to be happy to have you. The bad news is, and this flies right in the face of those who didn't like Jonathan Gannon, statistically, it's one of the best Eagle defenses of all time.
Don't say that, Joe.
Well, like you said, what do you want me to do? Lie to you?
Yeah.
They were the number 2 overall defense by a couple of yards, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
They were the number
I think
one
16 yards, by the way.
Right.
16 yards, essentially 1 yard per game, 17 games, but essentially 1 yard per game from being number 1.
From being number 1. And they were the number 1 passing defense in the National Football League. So, and oh, by the way, they got almost a record-setting 70 sacks. Certainly a record-setting for the Philadelphia Eagles. Almost the record-setting for all time in the history of the National Football League. And kind of like me, I'm with the masses on this one. I like sacks. You're you can acknowledge pressure kind of guy. I want you to get home. Pressures are nice. You're right. Sometimes pressures, like the championship game against Minnesota, well documented by my partner. He brings it up every time I question pressure.
First long, baby.
First long. They don't get the pick. No big seven. Eagles up. Yeah.
don't.
All that's true. And there are a lot of times where you get a pressure and the guy completes a 50-yard pass and they mark it down as a pressure as if that's a great play. No, you didn't get there. And the guy completed a 50-yard touchdown. So you got to go through it every single play and every single pressure to really get the feel of it. You put a little bit more emphasis on it. I put a little less emphasis on it. No one can argue sacks are good things. And yes, I like sacks. And yes, the Eagles got 70 sacks last year. And both John McMullen and Jody McDonald had taken the under on that one. Very, 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 very difficult to project 70 sacks for this team this year. So, yeah, the side's going to be held to that. And that's if there's going to be a drop-off, it better not be a massive one. Otherwise, the Eagle fans will start to hate the new defensive coordinator the same way they hated the old defensive coordinator.
And by the way, Jody, you've never you can go back to all the times we've discussed this, and you have never heard me say sacks are a bad thing. Where you and I differ is pressure is more predictive than sacks. Like, you know, a lot of people that criticize Jonathan Gannon point out they didn't face a lot of good quarterbacks, which is true. They didn't face a lot of good quarterbacks, and when they did, they struggled. Now, part of that is I laugh out loud because that's how it works. When you face good quarterbacks, you have more difficult time than when you face bad quarterbacks. But when you do face bad or lesser quarterbacks, when you do take advantage of it, that's a good thing. The Eagles had so many of these quarterbacks that didn't have pocket presence, didn't understand, like I always say, if you're facing Tom Brady, you're not getting a lot of sacks. You're not. You might get 3 would be unbelievable. You know, he's getting the football out on time. Younger quarterbacks tend to hold on to the football, tend to try to make plays, tend to not read defenses as quickly. And all of a sudden you have more opportunities. So to me, pressure is more predictive. But also to get back to Sean Desai, I did want to mention this. My buddy at The Honest NFL is one of the best followers on Twitter, especially if you like the Eagles. He used to work for the team, understands the scheme, understands the defensive philosophy. He broke down 5 games. I think he's doing them all, but he broke down 5 games when Desai was the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator in Chicago. The first 5, 4-man rush, 78%, 79%, 88%, 89%, 80%. That's what you're getting. You're not getting big. That's the defense. That's what it's going to be. That's amazing consistency. That even blew my mind. And you're up to 89%. Now, at the time, Chicago, I think, last year, Chicago fell off the table, as we know, from a pass rush perspective. They were pretty good for a long time on the pass rush. They were getting home with 4. Very good defense. So, part of that is you're successful like the Eagles were last year, 70 sacks. Why the hell are you blitzing if you're getting 70 sacks? It doesn't make any sense.
Don't need to blitz.
So,
that's that many more guys in coverage. Yeah.
The last thing you want is to not get home with 4. So you shouldn't be rooting for that is what I'm trying to say. And by the way, the Eagles should have one of the best pass rushers. They're not going to get 70 sacks, but they're still going to have one of the best pass rushes because their defensive line is so talented.
Let me ask you about that defensive line. I know I'm a Bucky Brooks fan. We discuss Bucky every once in a while. More draft season than anything else, but he's a contributor for the NFL Network all year long. I think he's pretty good. You're a Bucky Brooks fan too, right?
Yeah, I like Bucky. Yeah.
I think he does a good job. I saw this on NFL.com, which kind of surprised me because like you and all those others who have to cover the National Football League and come up with angles and stories all the 365 days a year, he decided to break down. Have you seen what Bucky's last post was?
I don't believe so.
Okay, good. He broke down every unit in the National Football League And when I say unit positionally, offensive line, defensive line, linebackers, secondary, all 32 teams, all 6 units. That's a lot of teams. Do the math. That's 180 something units. He came up with the top 5. The Eagles have 1 unit in the top 5 of all units in the National Football League. What unit do you think it is?
Well, I think it's going to be defensive line. I think it should be offensive line, but I think that's I'm guessing why you brought it up.
Yeah, that's exactly why I brought it up. And maybe a little disrespect coming here. Oh, Eagle fans love disrespect. The top 5 units in the National Football League, as per Bucky Brooks, going into this upcoming season. Number 1, the Philadelphia Eagles defensive line. So he's showing the Eagles defensive line a lot of love, putting them above all other positional groups in the NFL. Number 2, the Cincinnati Bengals wide receivers, which makes a lot of sense. They got a triumvirate.
It is a good group.
It really is. 3rd, and I like this one, the San Francisco 49ers linebackers. Somebody showing a little respect and a little love to the linebackers. It's not the Philadelphia Eagles, that's for damn sure, but Bucky Brooks is by putting the 49ers linebackers as the 3rd best positional group in the National Football League. Number 4 is an offensive line, and it's not the Philadelphia Eagles. The Detroit Lions.
I've been telling you that for years, Jody. That is a good group. I don't think they're as good as the Eagles, but
they're number 4. Philadelphia Eagles, not to be found on this list. Lions ahead of the Eagles. Big V, what's his name again? You can pronounce it?
Halapoulivaati Baitai.
There you go.
Who evidently contemplated retirement. I saw a story. I didn't read it though, but evidently Halapoulivaati Baitai contemplated retirement, but he's sort of the weak link on that line anyway. Very good offensive line.
He only contemplated. He's going to be back, and he's probably going to be at right guard. As a matter of fact, the Lions' only position of question is right guard, kind of like the Eagles. And the 5th and final one was the secondary of the Miami Dolphins with the addition of Jalen Ramsey, getting a lot of love from Bucky.
Yeah, that's a good group. And by the way, the Dolphins receivers, that's a good group as well. The Dolphins are pretty talented. Don't sleep on them as a Jets guy.
The stupid Super Bowl last year. I would have cashed so much money if it was the Eagles against the Dolphins, as I predicted.
They broke the Eagles' undefeated joint practice streak as well in the heat down there. Ed Kratz knows that.
Ed Kratz was down there, and he'll sweat it up with us next. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. You got Birds 365 here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel.
Do you stream